The IRGC operator was watching a clean scope. No contacts, no warnings, just the low hum of Iranian radar sweeping 21 miles of dark water at the entrance of the most important waterway on the planet. Then a voice crackled across Channel 16. "This is the last warning! This is the last warning!" He was talking to something he could not see. Two American destroyers, USS Frank E. Peterson and USS Michael Murphy, were already inside the strait. They had been there for 11 minutes before Iranian radar registered anything. And by the time the warning went out, it didn't matter. The American reply came back flat, calm, almost bored. "No challenge is intended to you." The destroyers kept moving. But what Iran didn't know, what nobody outside CENTCOM's classified operations center knew, was that the destroyers were not the mission. They were the visible part, the loud part, the part Iran was supposed to notice. Something else entered the strait that night, something that made no noise, something that needed no crew, something that was already beneath the surface, already working before the first radio call was ever made. And Iran had no way to detect it, no way to stop it, no way to even confirm it was there. This is not a story about one weapon. It's about the moment every weapon switched on at once. For 6 weeks, the Islamic Republic of Iran had done something no country had attempted since 1980. It had closed the Strait of Hormuz. Not threatened to close it, not warned about closing it, actually closed it. IRGC naval forces mined the shipping lanes. Dozens of devices, possibly hundreds, scattered across the 2 inbound and 2 outbound traffic corridors. Gadir-class midget submarines, diesel-electric boats barely 60 feet long, sat silently on the seafloor in the strait's shallow waters waiting. Fast attack craft armed with anti-ship cruise missiles swarmed the Narrows in packs of 4 and 5, harassing any commercial vessel that attempted transit without paying. And the payment was the point. Iran was charging over $1 million per ship. Every tanker, every LNG carrier, every container vessel, pay the IRGC or don't pass. Iran had turned the most critical choke point in global trade into a toll road. And for 6 weeks, nobody could stop it. Not because the US didn't have the firepower. Operation Epic Fury had already destroyed Iran's conventional navy. The Iranian Air Force was gone and its runways cratered, its fighters burned on the ground. Iran's nuclear enrichment facility at Fordow had been struck. Its ballistic missile production lines at Parchin and Isfahan were rubble. The US had crushed Iran's military, and the strait was still closed. That's the gap nobody was talking about. Firepower and control are not the same thing. You can destroy a country's navy and still not be able to use the waterway it mined before you got there. And here is the detail that changed everything. Iran had lost track of its own mines. The IRGC had laid them in such volume across such a wide area that Iranian authorities themselves could not account for every device. They published a map showing 2 safe routes for commercial shipping, which sounds helpful until you realize what the map actually says. If you have to tell ships where it's safe to go, you are admitting you don't know where it's dangerous. Iran had created a weapon it could not disarm. Even if Tehran wanted to comply with a ceasefire, even under direct orders, it could not guarantee safe passage through its own waterway. Think about that for a second. A nation whose navy no longer exists, whose air force has been destroyed, whose nuclear program has been bombed into rubble, is still controlling the most important waterway on Earth. Not with ships, not with fighters, with cheap, dumb explosive devices scattered across the seafloor faster than anyone could find them. That is asymmetric warfare working exactly as designed. Iran could not fight the US Navy ship to ship. It didn't need to. It just needed to make the water unusable. And for 6 weeks, it worked. The shipping companies were paying. The insurance premiums had tripled. Lloyd's of London had classified the entire Persian Gulf as a war risk zone. Global oil prices had spiked to levels not seen since the 1973 embargo. And every day the strait stayed closed, Iran's leverage grew, even as its military shrank. And that is when CENTCOM activated something they had never publicly deployed at this scale. The diplomacy died in a conference room in Pakistan. Vice President J.D. Vance had spent weeks building the back channel. Pakistani Army Chief General Asim Munir agreed to host. It was the first direct face-to-face negotiation between the United States and Iran in years. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi led Tehran's delegation. The location was deliberate, neutral ground, a Muslim-majority nation, no American flags on the table. The talks were quiet, no press conferences, no photo opportunities, just two delegations in a room trying to find a way to stop a war that both sides were already losing something in. The U.S. conditions were specific: 3 things. First, Iran dismantles what remains of its nuclear enrichment capability. Not pauses it, not suspends it, dismantles it permanently with international inspectors on site. Second, Iran surrenders operational control of the Strait of Hormuz to an international maritime authority, meaning the IRGC gives up the mines, the toll operation, and the patrol boats. Third, Iran stops charging transit tolls on international shipping, immediately, unconditionally, with reimbursement to shipping companies already extorted. Araghchi rejected all 3. Not 1, not 2, all 3, not counter-offered, not negotiated, rejected. On April 12th, the talks collapsed. Iranian parliamentary speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf told state media that American negotiators had failed to gain the trust of the Iranian delegation. The language was polite, the meaning was not. Iran was telling the world it would not give up the strait. That was the last door closing. 12 hours later, the military door opened. On April 13th, President Trump posted a statement to Truth Social. No diplomatic preamble, no legal framework, no conditions for reversal, just this. Effective immediately, the United States Navy, the finest in the world, will begin the process of blockading any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz. Any Iranian who fires at us or at peaceful vessels will be blown to hell. Now, that word, blockade. It matters. A deployment is military positioning, an escalation is a threat increase, a blockade is a declared act of war under international law. It means every vessel approaching the Strait of Hormuz is now subject to boarding, inspection, seizure, or denial of passage by the United States Navy. It means the U.S. is no longer asking Iran to open the strait. It is no longer negotiating for access. It is taking the waterway. And Trump didn't just declare it, he activated every asset in the theater to enforce it. Simultaneously, the architecture. Former NATO Supreme Allied Commander Admiral James Stavridis described the architecture in 5 words. You try and bottle it up on both sides. 21 miles wide, 2 inbound lanes, 2 outbound lanes, a 2-mile buffer zone. Every single barrel of Persian Gulf oil passes through this gap. 20% of global seaborne oil, 20 to 30% of global ammonia exports, 30 to 35% of internationally traded fertilizers, Europe's LNG supply, 1/3 of China's crude oil imports, nearly all of Japan's and South Korea's energy. The entire global economy runs through a passage narrower than the English Channel, and now it was sealed shut by the same Navy that had spent 6 weeks trying to open it. The outer ring, 2 aircraft carriers, USS Abraham Lincoln positioned south in the Gulf of Oman, USS George H.W. Bush to the east. Their air wings provide the umbrella F/A-18E/F Super Hornets for strike, E-2D Advanced Hawkeyes for airborne early warning, EA-18G Growlers for electronic warfare. Nothing flies over the strait without the carrier air wings seeing it. Nothing launches from the Iranian coast without Aegis detecting it. The middle ring, 9 Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers, spread across the Arabian Gulf, the Gulf of Oman, and inside the strait itself. Each one carries the Aegis combat system, the most advanced naval integrated air and missile defense system ever built. 96 vertical launch cells per ship. SM-2, standard missiles for area air defense. SM-6 missiles that can hit targets at ranges exceeding 250 miles. Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles for strike. Mark 45 5-inch guns for close engagements. 9 of these ships, over 800 missile cells between them. Any vessel that ignores the blockade gets intercepted by a Burke. Any vessel that fires on the blockade gets destroyed by one. Any coastal missile battery that targets the fleet gets hit by a Tomahawk barrage before the second round is loaded. The amphibious layer, USS Boxer with the 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit, USS Tripoli with the 31st MEU. The Tripoli carries F-35B Lightning IIs, the short takeoff, vertical landing stealth fighter that turns an amphibious assault ship into a light aircraft carrier. 2,000 Marines between the two groups. Visit, board, search, and seizure teams. Helicopter assault capability. Fast rope teams trained specifically for hostile ship boarding. If the blockade requires boots on a deck, On a tanker, on an oil platform, on a vessel refusing inspection? The Marines provide the answer. P-8A Poseidon Maritime Patrol aircraft running continuous orbits. These are the submarine hunters, multi-static sonobuoy fields, magnetic anomaly detectors, air-launched torpedoes. Every Qadir-class submarine in the Strait is being tracked by a Poseidon. Whether Iran knows this is unclear. Whether Iran can do anything about it is not. MH-60S Seahawk helicopters dragging mine-hunting sonar through the shipping lanes. The airborne mine countermeasures packages. AN/AQS-20A sonar sleds towed beneath the helicopter, scanning the seafloor for every device Iran placed. Littoral combat ships. This is the platform most people overlook. The LCS has a shallow draft. It draws less water than a Burke. It was designed specifically for constrained, mine-threatened, close-to-shore environments. It carries its own underwater drone systems for mine detection and neutralization. In open ocean, an LCS is outgunned by almost everything. In the Strait of Hormuz, in tight water, mined water, shallow water, the LCS is the ship that was built for this exact fight. And below all of it, the autonomous underwater vehicles. CENTCOM confirmed that underwater drones entered the Strait on April 11th, the same day the destroyers transited. They are clearing mines. That much is public. That much has been acknowledged in official statements and press briefings, but the full scope of their mission has not been disclosed. How many UUVs are operating? Of what specific type? Razorback, orca, snakehead, knifefish, or something not yet publicly named? What intelligence gathering capabilities they carry beyond mine detection? What else they are mapping on the seafloor? Whether they are operating autonomously or under direct operator control from one of the littoral combat ships. Nobody has answered those questions. CENTCOM has not been asked to, and that silence is the point. The classified element was never one weapon. It was never one platform or one ship or one drone. It was the moment every layer, surface, subsurface, autonomous, human, activated simultaneously under a single declared blockade, authority. It was the moment the U.S. Navy stopped being a collection of deployed assets scattered across two bodies of water and became a single integrated weapon system pointed at 21 miles of choke point, every carrier air wing feeding targeting data to every destroyer, every P-8 Poseidon feeding submarine tracks to every helicopter, every autonomous drone feeding mine locations to every LCS, every intelligence feed funneling into CENTCOM's combined air operations center in real time. Not sequential, not layered, simultaneous. Iran had spent 6 weeks exploiting the gap between American firepower and American willingness to use it. On April 13th, that gap closed. Not because the US got new weapons, not because a secret platform arrived, but because every weapon that was already there started talking to every other weapon. And the system went live. Iran's trap that trapped itself. Iran's strategy was brilliant, and then it destroyed itself. The IRGC turned the Strait of Hormuz into a revenue stream. Over $1 million per ship. Chinese tankers paid. Indian cargo vessels paid. South Korean LNG carriers paid. Iran was collecting hundreds of millions while telling the UN it wanted peace. But the toll scheme created a problem the IRGC leadership did not anticipate. Under international maritime law, the Strait of Hormuz is governed by transit passage rights. Any vessel can use it, any nation can sail through it. Charging commercial ships for passage through an international strait is itself a violation of those rights. And it gave the United States a legal justification it didn't even need to manufacture. Iran was building the case for the blockade with its own receipts, and then the mind map made it worse. When Iran published 2 safe routes for commercial vessels, it was trying to appear reasonable. See? We are letting ships through, we are being responsible. But the map exposed a catastrophic failure in IRGC planning. If you have to publish safe corridors, you are admitting that the remaining corridors are unsafe and that you cannot make them safe. Iran's own military had lost track of its mine placement. Devices were unaccounted for. Routes were uncertain. The IRGC had created a hazard it could not remove. The tolls gave the U.S. legal justification. The mine map gave the U.S. operational justification. The failed Islamabad talks gave the U.S. political justification. Iran slammed all 3 doors on itself. and the blockade walked through. There is a term in military strategy for this. It is called a self-defeating escalation. Iran raised the stakes so high, mining the strait, charging tolls, refusing every diplomatic off-ramp, that it made the most extreme American response not just possible, but inevitable. Every action Iran took to strengthen its position gave the U.S. another justification to act. Every dollar Iran collected in tolls was another line item in the legal brief. Every mine Iran could not locate was another reason to send the drones. Iran wanted leverage, it got a blockade. Now here's where the story fractures, and this is the part nobody has fully explained. On April 11th, USS Frank E. Peterson and USS Michael Murphy transited the Strait of Hormuz. CENTCOM confirmed this, published operational photographs of the destroyers in the Arabian Gulf on the far side of the strait. Mine clearance had begun. Autonomous underwater vehicles were in the water. The transit was complete. Iran says it never happened. Iran's military spokesperson denied that U.S. vessels entered the strait. The official Iranian narrative, the IRGC, issued a final warning over VHF Channel 16. The American ships heard it. They turned back. They never crossed. Both of these accounts cannot simultaneously be true. A civilian vessel near the strait recorded the radio exchange. The Wall Street Journal reported the intercept. The IRGC operator issued the warning. The American destroyer replied, "No challenge is intended to you." And then, according to every piece of evidence CENTCOM has published, the destroyer kept moving. That phrase, "No challenge is intended to you." Read it again. It does not say, "We are turning around." It does not say, "We acknowledge your authority." It says, "We are not here to fight you, but we are not stopping either." It is the most politely devastating sentence in modern naval warfare. It is a destroyer captain telling an entire nation's Revolutionary Guard, "I hear you, I don't care, I'm coming through." If CENTCOM is telling the truth, Iran's military lied to its own population about whether American warships are currently operating inside the Persian Gulf. That means the IRGC is telling its commanders, its government, and its people that the Americans were turned back, while American ships are sitting in the water on the other side. If Iran is telling the truth, then CENTCOM fabricated operational photography, published false after-action reports, and the Wall Street Journal printed a manufactured radio intercept from a civilian source that doesn't exist. One of these narratives is a complete fabrication, and the next Iranian vessel that challenges a U.S. warship at the entrance of the strait will resolve the question, because the blockade is now declared, the mines are being cleared, and the destroyers are already on the other side. That answer will not come from a press conference. It will come from the water. The cost. The blockade is declared. It is not risk-free. Iran retains approximately half of its missile launchers, half of its drone fleet. U.S. naval officials have described the Strait of Hormuz as an Iranian kill box. And they were talking about the danger to American ships, not Iranian ones. Every destroyer enforcing the blockade from inside the Gulf is operating within range of Iran's remaining Noor and Qatar anti-ship cruise missiles. The carriers are positioned outside the strait. It is not inside. There is a reason for that. A carrier strike group in the open ocean is the most powerful naval force on Earth. A carrier inside the Strait of Hormuz is a target. One mine, one ship, in a waterway with a fraction of the threats that exist in Hormuz today. The autonomous drones are clearing mines now, but mines are not the only threat. Gadir submarines can sit on the seafloor and wait for days. Fast attack craft can launch from concealed coastal positions in minutes, fire anti-ship missiles, and scatter before a response. Iran still has enough cruise missiles to attempt a saturation attack on a surface group, firing 20, 30, 40 missiles at once from multiple coastal positions, if it is willing to absorb the total annihilation that follows. That is the calculation. Iran can hurt the blockade once, and then it ceases to exist as a military force. The question is whether anyone in Tehran is desperate enough to make that trade. The blockade works because every layer is operating simultaneously. Carriers provide the air umbrella, destroyers enforce the surface, P-8S hunt the submarines, helicopters sweep the mines, LCS platforms work the shallows, autonomous drones map the seafloor, marines stand ready to board. Every layer supports every other layer. The moment any single layer fails, the mine clearance stalls, a submarine is missed, a P-8 loses track, a carrier pulls back for maintenance, the geometry shifts, and 21 miles of water becomes the most dangerous place on Earth for an American sailor. That is the cost. And CENTCOM calculated it this way. Every day the strait stayed closed on Iran's terms was a day the United States looked powerful but paralyzed. A navy that can destroy a country's military but cannot use the waterway it protects is a navy that is losing slowly, quietly, in a way that no press briefing can fix. That kind of loss is not measured in ships sunk or aircraft shot down. It is measured in perception, in credibility, in whether the next country that thinks about closing a waterway, China in the Taiwan Strait, Russia in the Black Sea, looks at Hormuz and sees a warning or an invitation. The blockade is the answer to 6 weeks of paralysis. It says, we are not waiting for Iran to open the strait, we are not negotiating for access, we are not paying tolls to a regime that cannot even locate its own mines. We are taking the waterway, we are clearing it ourselves, we are opening it on our terms. And the cost of taking it, the risk to our ships, our sailors, our carriers, is lower than the cost of one more day of letting Iran charge the world $1 million dollars per ship to use an international strait. That is the decision. It is already made. The ships are already in the water. Strait of Hormuz, blockade active. 20% of the world's seaborne oil moves through this gap. 35% of the world's internationally traded fertilizers, Europe's liquefied natural gas, China's crude oil lifeline, Japan and South Korea's entire energy infrastructure, all of it, hostage to 21 miles of water. For 6 weeks, Iran held that water. It mined the lanes, it charged the tolls, it told the world this was the price of striking the Islamic Republic. And for 6 weeks, the most powerful navy in human history could destroy Iran's military, but could not sail through the waterway it had protected for 40 years. That ended on April 11th, when 2 destroyers entered the strait and something else slipped beneath the surface. Something autonomous, something silent, something Iran's sonar never detected and Iran's navy never intercepted. It ended again on April 12th, when the last diplomatic option died in a conference room in Islamabad. And every off-ramp Iran could have taken disappeared with it. And it ended permanently on April 13th, when the President of the United States declared a naval blockade. And every carrier, every destroyer, every submarine, every drone, every mine hunter, every Marine, and every autonomous system in the theater activated under one authority. The classified element was never one weapon. It was never one platform. It was never a secret ship or a prototype drone or a weapon nobody had seen before. It was the moment the entire system switched on. Every sensor talking to every shooter, every drone feeding every operator, every layer covering every other layer. And Iran realized that the navy it had been tolling, taunting, and threatening for 6 weeks was no longer asking for passage, it was taking the strait. There is a photograph, released by CENTCOM, of the USS Frank E. Peterson operating in the Arabian Gulf after the April 11th transit. The ship is gray against gray water. No fanfare, no ceremony, just a warship on the far side of a choke point that Iran said could not be crossed. The captain of that ship, the man who answered Iran's final warning with "no challenge is intended to you," and then kept sailing through anyway, made a decision that 1,000 policy papers could not make for him. That decision was not about the blockade. It was not about the president's declaration or the failed talks in Islamabad or the mine clearance mission. It was about a 21-mile passage and whether or not he was going to stop. He didn't stop. He is now on the far side of the strait. He and his crew are the blockade. Iran said this was the last warning. The destroyer kept moving. The blockade is now in force. The warning was not for Iran.